Hello everyone, welcome back to Power for Nothing, a Magic the Gathering Cube podcast. I'm your host Dan, and as always, I'm joined by James. James, how are you doing this week? Are you ready for our next set review?
I'm always ready for a set review. We've got a new set, and it's not rubbish, and it's not Spider-Man.
Yeah, this one looks at least fun to draft. Today, we have part one of our Cube set review for Avatar: The Last Airbender. We have a lot of cool cards to get through today. It's always the way with these Universes Beyond, is that of all the IPs, this is the one that I'm probably the least familiar with of the ones this year. But with anything, I can get excited about new cool Magic cards, and we have an awesome 2 episodes for everyone to go through. Today we're going to be doing half the set, and then we'll be back next week with our part 2.
Yeah, I have no idea what is going on in Avatar, really, or what an airbender is, but there's a weird flying bison dude, so that's cool.
Yeah, exactly. There are some cool cards. Let's quickly touch on some notes on the set before we jump into the set review. Specifically that, from a mechanic point of view, this is oddly quite a parasitic set. And by that I mean there's a lot of cards that care about other specific cards. Like, there are lessons in this set. They care about cards with learn. Like, there are shrines in this set that care about other shrines. And also there's like a whole ally matters subset in this set. There are creatures that care about, like, allies being around. Now, to be honest, those are fairly niche archetypes that we might not go into too much detail in this review because they won't come up in the majority of cubes. Like, I know Shrines sees a fair bit of, or Shrines has seen play in Peasant Cube a fair bit. But from a set review point of view, it isn't interesting for us to just be run this in your Shrine deck and say that 5 times. You know what I mean? So, effectively, what me and James have been talking about is what we're going to do in the coming months is come back to these archetypes and kind of spend a bit more time on them and how they can properly be reflected in Cube. Like things like shrines, things like allies, but also specifically in this set, we have a bunch of cards with lesson, but not actually any cards with learn. We've seen them in Strixhaven, and we're going to see more next year when we go back to Strixhaven. Maybe that's a better time to talk about some of the lessons in this set, because a lot of the cards with lessons are cards we have seen before, but with lesson attached to it, basically.
Yeah, for sure. I think stuff like shrines, stuff like lessons, it needs to be talked about as a whole, as a package. You can't really talk about the cards in isolation because they're not interesting in isolation. So yeah, we're going to come back to that in a future show, but today is going to be about these are the cards which can go in a wider variety of cubes and kind of stand on their own a little bit more.
Yeah, that's it exactly. With all of our set reviews, we are comparing every card in a set to every card ever printed, and when we do our set reviews, we are trying to hit the broadest range of cards possible that will go in the most cubes possible.
That does kind of nicely bring us on to how we're going to be evaluating cards today. But these set reviews, when we talk about cards, we're generally going to be talking about them in terms of what cubes they could see play in. We'll either be talking about them in terms of power level of cube, so you have like your vintage powered cube at the top with all the best and broken cards where things have to be quick and super efficient, and then as you go down the power level, you have your unpowered cubes, your more mid-powered cubes like legacy and modern cubes. Things start getting a bit slower, and then you end up with your more entry-level cubes and your budget cubes, where things don't have to be as fast, they don't have to be as broken. You can run cards that need a bit more time to do their thing. We'll also maybe talk about sizes of cubes. The rule here is that the larger the cube is, the more you're looking for multiples of the same effect. So if we say a card could see play in a 540 or a 720 cube, we're saying that there's probably a better version of this card out there, but if you want multiples, then you could look at running it as well. We'll also shout out where relevant if the cards we're talking about we think could make a splash in Peasant, which is a cube made up of commons and uncommons, or Pauper, which is a cube made up of just commons. For what it's worth as well, me and James both own our own cubes. James has a very high-powered vintage cube, and I have an unpowered vintage cube, which is a little slower and lower powered than James, but still runs most of the broken cards. And I have the Treat Yourself cube, which is a lot slower and is trying to do bigger, more impactful things, but later in the game. So if we mention our own cubes, that's what we'll be talking about.
All right, with all that out of the way, James, do you want to take it away with our first white card of the day?
Yeah, for sure. First up in white, we have Airbender Ascension. This is 1 white for an enchantment. It says when this enchantment enters, you airbend up to 1 target creature. So straight in there with one of the new mechanics, airbending is, so we've got 4 different bending mechanics, I guess, from the new sets. Airbending is the first of them. It's and to airbend a creature or a permanent of any sort, you're going to exile it. And while it's exiled, its owner can pay 2 rather than pay its mana cost to cast it. So you can think of it sort of like a bounce effect, but rather than paying the mana cost to recast it, you're always just paying 2 to recast it. Note as well that the normal timing rules apply to recasting it. So if you airbend a creature, unless it has flash, you can only play it at sorcery speed.
And it will also just blip out tokens completely. You can't recast the tokens because they're not cards.
Yes, yeah, great point. Yeah, they stop existing when they're not on the battlefield. So yeah, tokens are gone forever. Okay, so back to Airbender Ascension. 1 white enchantment. When it enters, you airbend up to 1 target creature. Whenever a creature you control enters, you put a quest counter on this enchantment, and at the beginning of your end step, if this enchantment has 4 or more quest counters on it, you exile up to 1 target creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. So 1 white airbend target creature is like a pretty inefficient sorcery speed bounce spell is basically how you can think about that. So you can obviously get a blocker out of the way to enable an attack, but you could also, say, airbend one of your own creatures with a good enters the battlefield effect and recast it for value. Normally that's a play, if it was a bounce spell, you'd only want to bounce a very cheap creature to get VTB back, but with this locking the casting costs into 2, you can obviously do it on a more expensive thing if you want. But really where you're getting the money here is if you get up to the 4 quest counters. We've played cards in the past like, is it a Teleportation Circle, which is just a 4 mana enchantment that flickers something in end step. This, if it works, can get you that effect for 2 mana, right? Which is really, really powerful. The issue is you kind of have to play it fairly early to start building up those quest counters, but also you'd probably rather be casting a creature or something on turn 2 than casting this. So there's a little bit of tension there, I think. It's for that reason, it's probably not going in, your ruthlessly efficient high power level cube. But something more mid power level with a strong blink archetype, I think this could actually be really solid because I like the flexibility you get off of that ETB. I think that gives it a lot more application than if it was just doing this quest counter thing.
No, yeah, I'd agree with that. I think there's a cycle of ascensions in this set, and they're all effects that are good but a little bit inefficient. So I think you completely nailed it in terms of definitely one for a slower environment where you are supporting something like Flicker, where this is a nice little removal spell and it can then synergize later on in the game. I do think that late game, this is a little bit like late game. Generally, this is a bit miserable, but there is a world where just blipping one of their creatures out can help you swing through for some good damage or something like that. Just removing a blocker out the way. Tempo wise, I think it's okay, but yeah, I think this is a perfectly fine effect for these kind of decks. Like as you mentioned, there are effects like this kind of already in Cube. The fact that this can be a removal spell or a flicker thing is quite nice. Like if you just want the flicker thing, like you mentioned, Teleportation Circle, there is also cards like Soul Herder, which see a bit of play in Cube. I think for flicker decks, those are quite strong. But yeah, Airbender Ascension, perfectly fine Magic card, I think, yeah. Pretty solid one. All right, let's keep it rolling. Next up, we have Appa, Steadfast Guardian. It is 2 white for a 3/4 legendary creature, Bison Ally, with flash, flying, and when it enters, airbend any number of other target non-land permanents you control. It also has, whenever you cast a spell from exile, create a 1/1 white ally creature token. So just off the bat, base level, 4 mana for a 3/4 flash fire is just fine. That is a perfectly respectable body. It can do a nice job on defense, jumping in and removing a creature in combat. That's quite nice. This is just the base level of this card. Where I see this kind of as a slot where this could see play is I kind of see this as a little bit of a Teferi's Protection, but in Cube. And so that's a card you play and it just gives your whole board protection until next turn. And while at that effect, that is way better, this one is actually playable in Cube because it's also just a creature that you would run anyway, while you also have that ability to reset your whole board. I think that is a fine effect. I think that's kind of like a cool base level for this card. There are some cool things you can do with this card specifically, because with airbending, you have the ability to reset ETBs. And the flash makes this incredibly quite strong, because this works really well with things like pitch elementals. Like you can evoke a Solitude, flash this in, and basically then for 6 mana, you have Swords to Plowshares, 2 creatures, and you have 6 power in play and half of it flies. That's a really nice little combination. And I think that's generally quite good. The bottom ability, I think, is fine. You're mainly going to be getting it when you recast your spells off of them being airbended. But more things than you think will trigger this, like Foretell and effects like that, will also trigger and make you some tokens. You're not running this as a token maker. I think it's a nice little additional value on it, basically. But yeah, perfectly fine. Yeah. I think this is a pretty decent creature. What do you think of Appa, James?
Yeah, I quite like it. It's giving me good Restoration Angel vibes, you know. Good stats. It's you know, if you're just airbending one thing, then probably the Resto Angel ability of just blinking it is better, right? Because you have it back straight away. But this letting you hit multiple things, letting you save even like other non-land permanents. These don't have to just be creatures. That's really nice flexibility. You can also do stuff like it actually works really well with sagas, because you can let it go to the last chapter. You get all of your chapter effects, and then before sacrificing it, you flash this bin, airbend out the saga. Your saga is then sat there ready to be recast for just 2 mana and get all your value round again. That seems kind of strong. Yeah, the pitch elemental thing seems great. And just having that ability to hit a bunch of stuff means that often, you know, you'll flash this in because they pointed a removal spell at your guy and you want to save it. But then while you're here, you can also flicker out that Elvish Visionary type creature that was hanging around on the board too, you know. I think this will just end up doing quite a lot in most of the games. Sometimes you'll get some tokens off it. That's nice. I don't think this is a card where you're like building around trying to cast cards from exile. I don't think that's really what's going on here. But yeah, you'll quite often get 1 or 2 when you recast your stuff, and that's nice.
Sick. Love the Bison. And I realized as soon as I started saying it, I have no idea how any of the names in this set are pronounced. So apologies from the start if we are butchering someone's favorite cartoon here, but we're doing our best, okay? This next one should be a bit easier. James, what do you think of Avatar's Wrath?
Yeah, they can call this a Wrath. It isn't one. What Avatar's Wrath is 2 white for sorcery. Choose up to 1 target creature, then airbend all other creatures. So exile them, and the owner can pay 2 to recast them. Until your next turn, your opponents can't cast spells from anywhere other than their hands. So you get a turn before they can start recasting their stuff, and you exile Avatar's Wrath. Yeah, definitively not a Wrath. It's much more of a sort of mass bounce spell type of situation. But getting to keep that creature and getting the extra turn before they start redeploying stuff means this is potentially a huge tempo play. Like, this will win a bunch of games. It kind of feels like you have to win the game a lot of the time before they start redeploying their stuff. But if you have enough pressure, I think this is quite strong. The ideal case, right, is you have 1 really big creature. They have a decent sized board. You Avatar's Wrath. You get to hit them with your creature. You maybe even redeploy one of your creatures the same turn. Maybe not. Next turn, they hopefully don't have great plays. They can't replay their stuff. You can then, on your next turn, redeploy your board again, hit them again with the same creature, and now hopefully you're so far ahead that even them redeploying their stuff isn't going to be quick enough. Having said that, they're redeploying their stuff for 2 mana, so I think you do need to like really be taking advantage of that tempo during that window that you have. I think if you don't have pressure, this just isn't a good card. It's also worth noting that if you target your creature with this and then they kill your creature in response, that will fizzle the spell, which is kind of brutal.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay, fine.
Yeah, because it's even though it's up to 1, once you have selected 1 creature as a target, The spell can be
okay.
fizzled. You can choose to not select a creature as a target, and then they can't fizzle the spell. But then you're not getting the upside of keeping a creature and hitting them with it, right?
Okay, yeah, I'm on board with what you're saying on this. I see this as more. It is not a wrath. This is more like, I'm gonna say, a budget parallax wave, in that it's an effect that it's more like a 4-mana top end that like the white aggro deck is running. This is not like a card for like a control deck trying to like pin down the board. Like if this is going to see play, it is in a deck that is trying to swing through with creatures, and this is what might when your opponent stabilizes, this is what is going to push damage through. And I know, and James was definitely giving me a look when I said the word parallax wave, but parallax wave is 25 quid now. This hopefully will be like 50p, like in a more budget environment, which realistically is where this is going to see play. I don't think this gets near any high powered level cubes. In those more budget environments, this type of effect I think will be fine at pushing, like pushing damage through. Like the white 4s that we generally run are like the days of like mass land destruction in our 4-drop in white isn't really there anymore. Like I think that this is a fine way of trying to push some damage through if you've curved out in your white deck. Basically, that's kind of where I see this.
Yeah, for sure. It's the it's for 4-drop that will break open the board still, and it is good at doing that.
All right, let's keep it rolling. Next up, we have Momo, Friendly Flyer. This is a single white for a 1/1 legendary creature, Lemur Bat ally. It has flying, and the first non-Lemur creature spell with flying you cast during each of your turns costs 1 generic less to cast. It also has, whenever another creature you control with flying enters, Momo gets +1/+1 until end of turn.
Gonna be honest, definitely thought that at least one of those clauses didn't care about flying. Alright, this is much worse actually than I thought it was. I do like the idea of like a white 1-drop that makes your creatures cheaper to cast. Like, play this on turn 1, and then you can play your 3 drops on turn 2. I guess you do have things like Flicker Wisp and Elite Spellbinder you can curve into.
Yeah, I think the fact it only discounts your flyers means you really do have to be pretty committed to the flying theme, right?
Yeah, I definitely thought it was make all your creatures cheaper, and if you played a flyer, it got a counter. Like, that's actually, I think, a playable card, but I think this will really struggle.
I think if you're like blue-white flyers is a thing, like if you have favorable winds in your cube, you know, then you can put this in and it'll be good. Outside of that, you probably shouldn't.
But yeah, a nice little quick one there. What do you think of our last white card, James? What do you think of Suki, Courageous Rescuer?
Oh, it's a lot better than the Lemur, I'll tell you that. Yes, Suki is 1 white for a 2/4 legendary creature, human warrior ally. Says other creatures you control get +1/+0, and whenever another permanent you control leaves the battlefield during your turn, create a 1/1 white ally creature token. This ability only triggers once each turn. I think this is really solid if you're going wide with white stuff, or especially if you're doing some sort of black-white aristocrats thing. It seems really nice. Getting the token off any permanent leaving, though, means you probably don't even need to build around this that much. You know, like, you'll get a token off a fetch land, you'll get a token when they just block your stuff. I don't think it's that hard to get a token at most turns out of this, and 2/4 that buffs your team in a go-wide deck for 3 mana, that's pretty solid. I like this as an addition to basically any cube that is doing some vaguely go-wide stuff in white. Like, it's not quite at the level of, you know, an Adeline or something that is just a completely self-contained threat, but it needs a little bit of help. It needs a little bit of a board state to go along with it, but it's a very strong card, I think.
Yeah, I do like with this that, in theory, once you've made 1 token, it can then just continually pump, like kind of fuel itself, because if that token dies, you're just going to make another token. Like, I like the fact that it says permanent, it doesn't say non-token or whatever. So, yeah, definitely agree. This isn't on par with like the white Rebel Masters, kind of like Adeline, or probably not Brimaz or the buff Rabbit. But I do think this is, I agree. I think this is going to be quite solid in any go wide deck. I like it in a deck that's making a lot of 1/1s because then you're doubling the power. That for me, that's where this seems pretty strong.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, moving on to blue. First up, we have the Mechanist, Aerial Artisan. It is 2 and a blue for a 1/3 legendary creature, Human Artificer ally. It has whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create a clue token. And it has tap until end of turn, target artifact token you control becomes a 3/1 construct artifact creature with flying. So, there are actually quite a large number of effects in blue now that make an artifact when you do something. Those are pretty solid in decks that shockingly care about having a large amount of artifacts in play. Things like decks with Tolarian Academy, things like decks with Urza, or decks with like Urza's Saga, where just having a bunch of artifacts in play is kind of your game plan and then you'll profit from it later. This is fine there. Like, this isn't as good as things like Forensic Gadgeteer or Chrome Host Seed Shark or even like Psy Master Thopterist. I think those are all stronger than that. But those are, I think, are better because they make better bodies or they go infinite with things. Like, those I think are generally stronger, but I think this is still a nice option. And in lower powered level cubes, like, this is the kind of effect I would want if I was trying to make a go wide artifact deck, because like Chrome Host Seed Shark and like Psy are actually very, very strong magic cards, and kind of like they can be too powerful for some lower powered level cubes. And like Forensic Gadgeteer making infinite mana, that might not be something that you want in your cube. But if you want this kind of effect, like this and like the Saheeli and Third Path Iconoclast, I think are just like pretty solid ways of just like pooping out a little bit of artifacts. And then the fact that you can turn one of them into an evasive creature and like you have that way of grinding out a game as well as your main game plan, I think is fine. Like definitely I don't want for the highest power level cubes, but not a bad magic card.
Yeah, for sure. These make an artifact where I cast spells type creatures are often the way that the blue artifact decks get up to the really absurd artifact counts where they're popping off with their Academy or their Urza. This is, I think, certainly in contention for that slot. So you're right that it's worse than it doesn't make the bodies right, so it doesn't really keep you alive. The thing I like about this card, though, compared to Psy and compared to Forensic Gadgeteer, is that those cards trigger off casting artifacts, whereas this is any non-creature spell, which is a lot easier. Like,
yeah, so like your Ponders and your Preordains or your Lightning Bolts or whatever will also make you an artifact. That is quite nice. Yeah. That's a very good point.
Exactly. And it means you need to be slightly less all in on the artifact thing, right, to make this a good card. Like, you probably want to be getting paid off for having artifacts in some way, but you don't need to be the like 15 artifact deck, which like Gadgeteer and whatnot really ask you to do. Plus, like, the artifact decks are really good at making a lot of mana, so you will be able to turn these clues into cards when you need to restock. I think on average, making a 1/1 is probably better than making a clue, but I don't, it's certainly not cut and dried, right? That's a very context-dependent question.
Some Magic players will always take a card over a 1/1, James.
Yeah, for sure. Well, what if you had a Skull Clamp? Remember, 1/1 is 2 cards. So
there we go.
But yeah, no, I think if you've like got an Urza or an Academy or something in your deck, you'd like basically always run this card, and I think it's pretty strong. But the question is just like, do we find a slot for it? I think, we're not cutting Third Path, we're not cutting Saheeli, so it's like, could we cut Forensic Gadgeteer for this? Maybe from some of the high power cubes, you could consider it. I think this is a better card 90% of the time, but Gadgeteer does go infinite with monoliths, which this obviously isn't able to do. So I think that's kind of a judgment call. I think it's a perfectly reasonable card to include.
All right, nice. We have another blue card, James. What do you think of Ty Lee Chi Blocker?
Yeah, so this is 2 and a blue for a 2/1 legendary creature human performer ally. It has flash and prowess, and when Ty Lee enters, tap up to 1 target creature. It doesn't untap during its controller's untap step for as long as you control Ty Lee. So when this works, this is going to be pretty strong. Like you'll remove their threat and you get a really solid attacker, right? Like this is pretty routinely going to be attacking for 3 evasive damage. That's keeping your opponent's best creature tapped. You got a good deal. The issue is that you're paying 3 mana for 1 toughness, and it's kind of a rough deal, you know? Like, they just shock this too often, I think, you know?
Yeah, I've never seen something eat a shock so quickly.
Exactly. And it's not like you got a card on the way in, right? Like, you just got, if they just shock it, like, you tap the guy down for a turn, you're not happy with that exchange. Yeah, so I would guess this doesn't end up making the cut too many places.
Yeah, I would agree. The aggressive prowess creatures are always ones that I find are great in theory, but don't really come to, like, that deck really struggles just because, like, you're a deck that wants to have all these prowess creatures, but then everyone is taking all your good instant and sorceries because they're just good cards that go in every deck. Like, I think this is a good card, and like if you are specifically doing prowess tempo, I think this is one of the better prowess like aggressive creatures out there. But you'll know if you want this basically. Like that is definitely one that for more kind of mid-rangey cubes where the deck is like this kind of, it's like prowess creatures. It's like maybe pump spells, like Feather the Redeemed, ways of recasting spells. That kind of thing. Like, yeah, I think it's fine, but that deck does tend to struggle in higher powered level cubes because this will just eat a remove. Like, yeah, I think it's a fine card, but yeah, I'm not super blown away by it. Next up, we have Wan Shi Tong, All Knowing. This is 3 blue for a 4/4 legendary creature, Bird Spirit, with flying, and when it enters, target non-land permanent's owner puts it into their library second from the top or on the bottom. And whenever 1 or more cards are put into a library from anywhere, create 2 1/1 colorless spirit creature tokens with this token can't block or can't be blocked by non-spirit creatures. So I think this is a cool card. How we're basically reading it is it's 5 mana for 6 power with evasion and a temporary removal spell on something. On its own, that is a decent rate in quite a lot of budget and lower powered level cubes. Getting synergy out of this is a bit more tricky, if I'm honest with you. Like most of the ways in higher power level cubes that we're going to be putting things back into our library are things like Time Twister style effects, where we're kind of shuffling our whole graveyard back into our library, that kind of thing. But the issue with like Time Twister is with this and the way that's worded, you'll only ever make 2 1/1 spirit creature tokens. Like if it was unlimited and this could be a wheels payoff, I'd be really, really high on this. But as it is, I think that will stop it getting into higher power level cubes. But there are plenty of more budget environments where 5 mana for 6 power evasive with a removal spell is pretty good. Like there might be a world where kind of like in the future the like Sultai Insidious Roots decks can kind of find ways to repeatedly make tokens with this. I don't think that deck really exists right now in Cube, so it's kind of, so as it is, it's kind of like it's the face of the card. I don't see much synergy for it, but on raw power level for 5 mana, I think this is perfectly solid. Like if you like this card, or if you're vibing with it and you're running a cube, run it. It'll be fine.
I kind of think this is really good.
No, I do like it. But okay. Do you like it as it is, or is there more synergy with it you can think of?
I mean, I think the synergies will come up, but I mean, mostly, right? 5 mana, I get 6 evasive power across 3 bodies and kill their thing. Like, is any non-land permanent as well? I know that seems like a lot for 5 mana to me. Like, I know we're not really allowed to cast many 5-drops in our powerful cubes anymore, but I don't know. I think if I wanted to put a 5 mana blue value creature, or just like a 5 mana value creature in a cube, like there's not that many that I would pick over this. I think this is a lot.
Okay. I just looked. I currently don't have any blue 5-drops in my cube, so maybe I should just run this.
No, neither do I. I have a torrential...
blue 5-drop creatures, yeah.
I have a torrential Gearhawk, which sounds questionable in my powered cube, so maybe I'll switch that out for one of these and give it a try. Like, I'm not saying it's like, you should put it in all the powered cubes right away, because I think, there are issues with cards like this. But I think at its role, I think it's excellent. And I think you will find spots where you get more tokens. Like, obviously, even just stuff like Brainstorm gets you 2 tokens.
Oh, that's quite hot.
Yeah,
okay.
Things like...
Jace the Mind Sculptor, there you go.
Jace the Mind Sculptor gets you 2 tokens a turn. Sensei's Divining Top gets you 2 tokens a turn.
Okay.
Sylvan Library is 2 tokens a turn. I think if you can get one or 2 of those repeatable ways in, I think that's really nice.
Okay, that is quite hot. Yeah, and I guess actually and I'm thinking about it, if they answer this, you've still tucked their thing and got 2 evasive creatures. So yeah, okay, maybe this Wan-Shi... I liked it. I just wasn't sure how much higher we can go. But yeah, you have just listed a bunch of cards that are all in powered cubes that that see play in a lot of cubes. So yeah, that is quite hot. But we have another Wan-Shi Tong, James. What do you think of Wan-Shi Tong Librarian?
Yeah, this one's also interesting. It's X blue for a 1/1 legendary creature bird spirit. It has Flash, Flying, and Vigilance, and when Wan-Shi Tong enters, put X +1/+1 counters on him, then draw half X cards rounded down, and whenever an opponent searches their library, put a +1/+1 counter on Wan-Shi Tong and draw a card. So the rate here is like pretty solid if you can make a lot of mana. It's not dissimilar to Hydroid Croesus, right? In rate, you're getting the same number of cards. You're getting basically the same size creature. That guy has Trample. This guy has Flash and Vigilance. I think I take for Flash there. I think this is pretty solid. Yeah, the Flash, I think, makes it a lot more flexible, right? Like, it gives you the ability to play it as a big finisher in a control deck because you can cast it in your opponent's end step, right? And that's like a nice angle to have on a card like this. It means it's not limited to just going in ramp decks. But you do need to be like, have reasonable avenues to cast this for like X's 5, you know? I think if you're just trying to cast it for X's 2, this is not that exciting as a 4-drop, you know? You kind of need roots to make a lot of mana here. But it is also true that, like, you know, sometimes your opponent will just crack a fetch and you'll flash it in on like turn 3 and you'll get an extra value on the way in, and that's fine too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This one I do think gets better in higher powered level environments where fetch lands are more common in the mana base, and also just general tutors like Demonic Tutor, Mystical Tutor, all of those type of things. It's just going to naturally be better in those environments because there's more places where kind of you get the counter for free, and the Flash does mean that you can respond. Like, can you respond to fetch lands with this, James? Will you get the counter, and if you flash this in response to a fetch?
Yeah, because they do the searching when the trigger resolves. So yeah, you'll get your counter, you'll get your card.
Very hot. Like I'm probably going to test this in my cube because I also have double fetches, and just an environment where there's naturally more of them means that on average everyone's going to be doing it slightly more. And like, I mean, this is just going to. I kind of love the fact that this does wreck the like 4-color Triome deck, just because we need a nice way of punishing mana bases, and maybe Wan-Shi Tong is the way to do it. But yeah. The only other thing I would just add is on the Hydroid Crisis comparison, this being monocolored, I do think is actually quite huge. You don't have to splash into a second color in green like the Hydroid Crisis, and that is a card that I think I was in a lot of cubes until relatively recently. It is a strong Magic card, and just this being a monocolored version of it, I think is pretty cool. Yeah. I am quite high on this one. This might be one of the most generically strongest cards in the set, if I'm honest. But I quite like Wan-Shi Tong. Both of them, in fact.
Yeah. Go full bird librarian tribal.
There's got to be some more out there we can run, maybe some Sphinxes or something. But anyway, we have a lot of cards to get through. Let's move on to black now with a Fire Nation Occupation. Ooh, I do like the rhyme there. 2 and a black for an enchantment. When this enchantment enters, create a 2/2 red soldier creature token with Firebending 1. This is the first time we're seeing Firebending. Firebending is whenever the creature with Firebending attacks, you add a red mana equal to its Firebending number. This mana lasts until the end of combat. Whenever you cast a spell during an opponent's turn, create a 2/2 red soldier creature token with Firebending 1. So I think this card is okay, not fantastic. Like, this really does need to go into like a certain kind of deck. And the deck I'm thinking of does exist in a lot of cubes, and that's the billion removal Grixis control deck. Like, I kind of like the deck where you're just playing all the removal spells, all the counter magic in Grixis colors, and you're just basically kind of one-for-oneing what your opponent is doing. This I think is quite nice, because eventually what you're doing is you're going to have the resources to cast spells on your opponent's turn. Like, the fact that at the base we are getting a creature out of this means that it's not a just dead card in our deck. In worst case, it will make us a blocker. Fine. If we can then get some more tokens out of this, and I think it does get better and actually kind of playable, and it does become a nice little engine when it gets going. I like the fact that the firebending creatures, they will stack very nicely, and they like if we can start making 2 or 3 or 4 mana out of this, in theory what that will do is that lets us cast some instance on our turn while still leaving our lands up on our opponent's turn, which fuels the I guess Grixis controlling nature of our deck. Like we can cast our burn spells on our turn and our counter spells on our opponent's turn, that kind of thing. The main issue is that like that is a tricky deck to kind of support. Like there is an argument of like, do you want this or do you just want another removal spell? That is kind of the tricky part of this. Like I think this card is cool. I think this card is fun. Yeah, what do you think of Fire Nation Occupation, James? I like saying it, at least.
It is fun to say. That is strong. Yeah, I think it's a cool effect. I kind of wish it was in blue, you know? Black feels like a weird
color. This would be really good in blue. Yeah.
Black feels like a weird color to have this effect to me. But it's not weak. Like, getting a 2/2 for each spell you cast on their turn, and it's not limited to 1 a turn either, you know? You often see them putting 1 a turn on these things because they don't like fun. But this time they let us stack them up. And it is cool. I personally wouldn't get too attached to trying to use a firebending mana. I think, like, this is maybe just your sort of inevitability. This is like the one time in the game that I'm tapping mana on my turn, or the rest of the time I tap my mana on your turn, and eventually, like, I don't need my 2/2s to be synergistic because I got 12 of them from this one card. And like the first 8 all jumped in the way of blocked stuff, and then eventually they killed you, you know? So I think that's kind of fine. Yeah, maybe like Grixis is the place. Yeah, I'd be really into it if it was in blue. I still think it's fine. Yeah, could be an interesting test.
I guess it does go... I kind of like it with like the free spells, actually, with like... but I mean like spells that untap your lands when you cast them. Like if you can cast a spell pre-combat, use the firebending to cast like not turnabout, but
Frantic Search.
Cast a Frantic Search during combat, untap your lands. That's kind of hot while doing a bit of card casting. Like yeah, this card is cool, but yeah, I do agree. If this was blue, I think we'd be a bit more higher on it, but yeah.
So like card. That stuff does sound cool, but then also wouldn't I rather just cast those spells on my opponent's turn and make like a bunch more 2/2s, you know?
That's true. Maybe you're drawing cards into the removal spells, James.
Maybe.
But yeah, fair. Oh yeah, but yeah, fun one. Yeah. Would you say it's more of an engine card than just like a generically strong card?
Yes, yeah. I think you can't put this in like a black mid-range deck that's going to tap mana on its turn. Like, you can't be registering Grey Ogres in 2025. I don't care if they have firebending.
I was thinking more just like the worst Fable of the Mirror Breaker variant, actually, but...
No.
It's fine, don't worry. All right. What about the next one, James? We have a big shape-shifting spirit next.
Yes, next up we have Ko the Face Stealer. This is 4 black for a 6/6 legendary creature shapeshifter spirit. Says when Ko enters, exile up to 1 other target creature. Whenever another non-token creature dies, you may exile it, and you can pay 1 life to choose a creature card exiled with Ko. Ko has all activated and triggered abilities of the chosen card. So the thing is with this activated ability, triggered ability stuff, is that I don't think it's sort of worth trying to do something fancy where you set up like a synergistic creature of your own to exile with this. That that I think is too cute, right? So I think mostly we're treating this as a giant ravenous chupacabra, and occasionally there'll be a cool ability that we'll get to use, but I don't honestly think it's a huge part of the card. Like getting triggered abilities as well as activated, I guess, is something. So you could get, for example, if you kill something with ward, you can get the ward ability. Although do bear in mind with that, you have to pay the life before they target this to get the ward to work. But yeah, I think in general, I'm just viewing this as like a noxious Gearhulk type, giant that kills something. I don't think it's that good. Like, compare this to the 5 mana blue guy, right, per Wan Shi Tong. Like, this is a whole extra mana, isn't evasive, doesn't create multiple bodies, only hits creatures. And now I think it's I think it's a lot worse than that card, just for comparison,
Yeah, at some point in time, it did not have the word last chosen card on it. And at that point, I think it would have been awesome.
Oh, if you could stack them all up, that would be sweet, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, if you have ways of just just doing cool things with it. But I think it's, you have completely nailed it. Like, it is a exiling 6 mana Chupacabra, basically. Like, it doesn't have evasion either. It was kind of annoying. Like, I was looking at even like Tetsamok, like the really the very powerful but slow dinosaur. Like, even as Death Touch, like, it's not the most powerful ability on a 6/6, but like, it's better than nothing, if that makes sense. It's just this doesn't have like trample or flying or anything like that, or swamp walk. I don't know. Just I think it's a cool one. And like to be fair, like it is also in a tough spot that just black 6s are incredibly good. The fact that if I was looking at this in a cube, I'd be comparing it to like Troll of Khazad-dûm or Grave Titan is incredibly difficult. Like, if I saw this in a cube, it will do a job, but it's not one that I'm super excited by, if I'm honest with you. And it is a mythic, so it could randomly be expensive.
Yeah, I'm sure you can do some nonsense in Commander with this. I kind of wish with the ability they gave you a way to like exile cards from your graveyard or something, so you could actually set this up a little bit. It feels like the way it's done, it's really disincentivizing you from trying to like build around it and put cards in your deck to use. So you're kind of just hoping that it comes up every now and again, right? You're not like making it work.
Yeah, being honest, I think the effect is just quite underwhelming. Like, it's a very safe ability.
Say your opponent has a Blood Artist, it's not a replacement effect. It happens after. Is that right? So like you still get drained from a Blood Artist because it will die and go to the graveyard, and then it goes to exile.
Yes, it's a trigger, I think.
Right.
Whenever another non-token creature dies, you may exile it. So it'll go to the graveyard, and there's a trigger that lets you exile it under this.
Yeah, because if it was doing like the Dothy Voidwalker thing as well, of like nerfing like some decks out of the game, like if it was like a sideboardy card as well, if it was like a mucking up the graveyard style card as well, then there might be some play. But the more we're talking about it, the more I'm off of Core the Face Stealer.
Yeah, it seems kind of tough.
So let's get the ball rolling. We have my Scornful Striker next. This is 1 and a black for a 2/2 legendary creature, Human Noble Ally. It has first strike, and whenever a player casts a non-creature spell, they lose 2 life. So this does seem like a cool card if you're doing like anything like a Hate Bears related style black and white deck. Like, this feels very much like a color shifted Thalia, basically. It's punishing players for casting non-creature spells. Like, Thalia hitting the mana is definitely better, but like as an additional piece to that deck, I do think this is fine. Like, Orzhov Hate Bears isn't the most common archetype that you see, but it definitely has enough bits to exist nowadays. There's plenty of cards in white and black that punish your opponents. Like, there's like hand attack in both colors now. There's good creatures. Like, this is a nice cheap creature that you can land, and it will do a bit of damage as the game goes on. Without going into that deck, I think this will struggle, because while one reason we still run Thalia in cubes is because white aggro is good, and Thalia is a fine aggressive creature on top of being an annoying piece. This doesn't have that. Like, black isn't generally the aggro color anymore, and by anymore I mean like since Carnophage was printed. You know what I mean? Like, I think this is it's a very cool, cheap, efficient card, but it needs that deck to exist. Basically, like you need to be doing something where there's multiple of these kind of like there's plenty is there like Kambal that kind of does a similar thing. Like you could make a whole package with these cards now, and I think that could be a cool deck. But I think this is one for that deck, not really one anywhere else.
Yeah, I don't know. This isn't exciting to me. I think it's fine if you were trying to make black aggro a thing in your cube. Then I guess this is a 2-drop you could put in. But there are so many better 2s in black. You know, you look at your Dark Confidants, your Caustic Broncos, even like Babat. You know, Babat's sick. I don't think we need to be doing this, and it's not. Yeah, I don't know. To me, this is like neither powerful nor that cool. So I'm kind of not super hyped for it. But yeah, if you want to lean into like black aggro, I guess you could make it. You could try this. Maybe if you're doing the Death Shadow thing, you know, you can put this card in. But I am still a skeptic of the Death Shadow thing.
Oh, that's kind of hot. Well, when they print 2 more Death Shadows that are actually as powerful as Death Shadow, then we can make it work. I think that's more the issue with that deck.
We can certainly try.
All right. Take it away with our next card, James. We have an enchantment coming up next.
Yeah, next up we have Obsessive Pursuit. This is 1 black for an enchantment. Says when this enchantment enters and at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life and create a clue token. And whenever you attack, you put X+1/+1 counters on target attacking creature, where X is the number of permanents you've sacrificed this turn. If X is 3 or greater, that creature gains a lifelink until end of turn. So this represents a lot of value over the course of a game. The issue is it's very mana intensive to be cracking all of those clues. You're probably not going to want to do that until later in the game. And then obviously, you know, you're reliant on when you start cracking the clues, do you have a creature that you're attacking with at that stage? Not necessarily, right? You might be digging to find a creature, and then because you actually have to attack with the creature, you might not get those get that value if you just cast it this turn, right? However, it does get a lot more interesting if you have other ways to sack permanents, or even other ways to sacrifice these clues other than just paying the full retail 2 mana every time. So, you know, maybe you're cracking some treasures and then your attackers get bigger. That's great. Maybe you have something like the black 2-drop we got a couple of sets ago that can sack creatures or artifacts. You know, you're doing some Mayhem Devil shenanigans. Now I'm getting interested in an Obsessive Pursuit, you know? And we've seen a little bit more recently of the Black Sacrifice Matters stuff caring about sacking any permanents rather than just caring about sacking creatures. And this sort of plays into that quite nicely, I think. And yeah, as a further incentive to, you know, have a bunch of treasures and bloods and clues and all of this nonsense, which we do just see thrown onto cards quite freely now. So yeah, I think there's something there.
Yeah, I do like this card, but I like with some of the other enchantments that we've touched on, like some of the Ascensions, I do think it is a little slow. And like one thing that has me a little down on this card is it does dictate when you do your sacrificing. Like one of the classic things of an aristocrat deck is kind of like you swing with like 2 or 3 aristocratic creatures that get buffed when you sack a creature, and your opponent can only block 2 of them. You put all the damage on the one that goes through. That's how you kind of push damage through and win the game, that kind of thing. I know that specific build is more like constructed than traditionally cube, but just like it's with this, you have to do all your sacrificing pre-combat. You can't like do it on like your opponent's end step, for example, or like on their turn when they attack you and you block and then sack some stuff and do some cool stuff that way. It's very much forcing you to get your value on or do your thing on your first main phase, so you do this. I do think like this could still be good. Like the fact it is counters, I do like. It is I guess it's swapping a timing restriction for a permanent effect. Like giving stuff counters is quite nice. And yeah, effectively on what is pretty much like a Phyrexian Arena variant. You say that's fair in terms of it's a thing that's just giving you a card in theory every turn. I think this is a fine card. Again, I'm a bit stuck on where it would go. Like I think you did kind of nail it with in a cube that is like wanting to do like aristocrats as well as like care about like artifacts going to the bin. So maybe if you're kind of doing artifacts in Orzhov and Arista scraps the artifacty sack version in Rakdos, and maybe this is a nice kind of like card that goes in both. I could see that working quite nicely, for example.
Yeah, sounds cool.
All right. Next up in black, we have Phoenix Fleet Ship. This is 2 black for a 4/4 artifact vehicle with flying and crew 1. It also has, at the beginning of your end step, if you sacrifice a permanent this turn, create a token that's a copy of this vehicle. And as long as you control 8 or more permanents named Phoenix Flagship, this vehicle is an artifact creature. So, a couple of bits with this card. I actually quite like this card. We've seen Crew 1 on a bunch of vehicles, and of all the crews, Crew 1 is probably the best because it is very much a thing of you can just upgrade any dorky creature into crewing your vehicle, and that is nice. I do think that this is very much a build around, and I don't think this can just slot into a normal cube. Like, the cube needs ways of triggering this to be good. Like, you need the Aristocrat deck, you need the Aristoscrap deck, you need something where, like, you need to put cards in a cube, or there needs to be cards in a cube to support this. And, like, just fetch lands, I don't think is enough. Like you need to be like putting like Blood Fountain or things like that in your cube, and like baubles. These need to be in your cube. But if you have those and you can slot this in, I do quite like this because yes, you do need a creature in order to crew it. But like, if we've been sacrificing things, they do importantly stack. Like the copying do importantly stack. So the first one on the first turn, if you sack something straight away, say you sack your bauble the turn you play this, you will then have 2 of these. If you do that again, you will have 4 of these. It's the turn after that, like you could have your 8 4/4s in 3 turns, I think it is. Like, that's pretty good. I don't think that's specifically why you're putting it in here. Like it's a nice thing to have. I think you will get to it, especially in slower cubes. Like I'm interested in this more in my slower cube as like I play this and here's like kind of like a mini game that we're doing now. Am I going to win with an army of airships? And I think in slower environments, I think you will get that, and I think that's quite good. The fact that you do need like once you go past the first couple, you will need a lot of 1/1s as well, which is kind of where this gets a bit trickier because these can't attack by themselves until you get to 8. Like that is that they are vehicles. There is a downside. I know that playing a 4-mana 4/4 flyer that can't attack unless you have a 1/1 in most powered cubes or most high powered level cubes is tricky. But in slower cubes, I really like this. And there's one other thing I wanted to touch on that might pique your interest, James. This could secretly be a stacks card. Because if we get to the point where we're making multiple of these, or maybe where we're making a couple of these in a turn, these work really nicely with cards like Smokestacks or Pox. Because, like, in theory, with this, we can keep ahead of the stacks count. If we get 2 of these and then play a Smokestacks, we can kind of, we're making enough stuff. Like basically, this is like a better Bitter Blossom at that point. Like, yes, I know it's 4 mana and a vehicle, but like, I'm not saying that is why. Like, I'm not saying this plus Smokestacks equals Stacks is back, but I think that there's something cool there. Is what I want to say.
yeah, that sounds cool. Like, get my braids both enables this and this enables it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, no, I think this is an interesting payoff for sacrificing stuff. You can definitely do the thing. My issue is slightly the need for crew, you know? Like, if a creature where we made more creature, where we copied it in the end step, if we'd sacked a thing, and then, 1 becomes 2, becomes 4, becomes 8, and that sounds sick. This isn't quite that because, once we've made 4 of them, we're very unlikely to be attacking with 4 of them, right? I understand it's a 4/4 flyer. We don't necessarily need to be attacking with all of them, but it feels like we need quite a lot to come together, right? Because we need this in play, we need to be sacrificing stuff, and we need creatures left behind to crew. Not saying that combination of things can't happen, but it's asking more work of us than some other payoffs. But I think this is like definitely worth looking at for a slower cube that gives you some time to develop your synergies. And yeah, and it does do the nice thing, like where it actually plays very well versus removal because it's not a creature when you play it, so they often won't be able to just kill it right then and there. And then you make a copy of it, so then even if they find some artifact removal, it's ineffective because the one that is left over will keep making more copies. So yeah, that part's nice. It does kind of give you inevitability. But yeah, I don't really want to be just sitting and waiting to get 8. I think that does generally take too long, and even if you get to 8, they can still kill one of them, and then the other 7 fall out of the air, right? Until your next turn. So, yeah, I think you do need a way to crew them.
Oh, yeah, they won't stay creatures, will they?
Yeah, so if you're attacking me with 8 Phoenix fleet airships, and I fatal push 1, then the other 7 cease to be creatures, right?
That does kind of suck. The other line I had with this, which I then had to check myself on, was like, mechanized production, the one that makes you 1 on upkeep every turn, and if you have 8, you win the game. It's like, that'll easily get us to 8 Phoenix fleet airships so we can attack with them. Wait a sec. Wait a sec. We're almost cooking. Yeah. I'm very aware that Phoenix fleet airship could be a bit too commander for a lot of cubes, but I do think it's cool and kind of like, I don't know. I feel like treating myself to a Phoenix fleet airship, if I'm honest with you. So I'm probably going to slip it into that cube.
It is definitely cool. I was looking if it's the first airship in Magic or the first Zeppelin in Magic, but it is not. There was Stronghold Zeppelin was in Nemesis, and also looks like a banger.
Nemesis?
Yeah. So 4 mana 3/3 flyer that can only block creatures with flying. So get that in a cube too.
Yeah. Nice. All right. Well, we have one more card for today, James, before we finish up. What do you think of Raven Eagle?
Yeah, so Raven Eagle is 2 and a black for a 2/3 creature bird assassin. Has flying, and whenever this creature enters or attacks, exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard. If a creature card was exiled this way, you create a clue token. And whenever you draw your second card each turn, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. I feel like they could have given us a little bit more juice on that last ability. Like draining for 1 only once a turn is pretty mopey, right? But this is a very solid little value creature, right? It's nice that you get the clue on the way in as well as on attacks. So, if the game is about value and the game is about card quantity, then this will be a really strong card for you. But it's not a quick card. And it's not a card that, snowballs super fast, right? Like, it's... you've got to keep investing that mana. You're realistically not going to do that until much later in the game. But there is something to be said for, you get in that spot where you've piled up a bunch of clues and you're like, I just need to progress the game for long enough that I can start sinking mana into these clues, and then I'm going to outcard my opponent. And that's a fine plan, and this will execute that. It's not, I'd say, a super exciting card, but it is very solid.
Yeah, I think the thing where I like this card is that it's effectively this is like a bit of graveyard hate that isn't going to just completely destroy the graveyard deck. This is more kind of in line with like a Scavenging Ooze than like a Rest in Peace, if that makes sense. And I do generally prefer those kind of hate pieces because like it still gives a bit of play to the situation. It doesn't just be like, okay, I play this sideboard card and now you can't do anything. Like there is a bit of back and forth that I kind of like with this. So that could be where the seed play. Like the other place, like where I think this would be fine is like, and it is like a cube environment that I do like, and it's where things like Merfolk Looter are good. Sometimes I do just like drawing some cards and setting up a little dawdly engine, that kind of thing, and like that is a lower powered level cube, but like in those environments, I think this is just gonna be a fine card. Like if you have any repeatable way of drawing a card a turn, this will just like chip in through some damage in the sky, drain them out. It'll be annoying. while you're kind of filtering through your deck, like, getting your answers, getting your control pieces, that kind of stuff. Like, again, this isn't the most busted card in the world, but for a 3-mana flyer, like, there'll be plenty of environments where this is just a solid card that kind of fits in nicely to what the environment or what the power level of an environment generally is.
Yeah, for sure. It seems perfectly solid. I think the only other thing to flag for it, right, is that if this comes down on turn 3, you're probably not like reliably making a clue every turn. You're just not going to have enough fuel in a lot of games. You can't just assume that there's a nice, convenient pile of creatures in the graveyard at all points.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
All right, marvellous. That's where we're going to leave it for today. Do make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you get notified when part 2 comes out. That should be next week, where we'll be going over red, green, multicolored, and lands. Until then, it's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from James, and we'll see you all soon. Goodbye.